Okay, welcome, Mr. Cupford. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Good to be here, Carmine.
How is the weather out there and sunny? Is it sunny? Can I say I could see it, so I
Well,
guess it's sunny.
well, it's interesting you say that. I mean, it is, which is the default out here in Southern California, where I spend most of my time. But it was actually raining last night and this morning, which is very rare.
Wow. All right, so it's not always sunny in California. Is that what they say?
Not always, but
Yeah.
if you're a betting man and you want to take any given day, you'd be up money if you bet on sun.
Yeah, I was just out there. I was supporting someone in the industry that just launched did a book launch in San Diego, and
Ah,
I'm out there and I'm doing my daily run right across from Coronado Island. And it was on 9/11, they were having all the battleships come in as a memorial. And
yeah.
it reminds me of why people like you go out to California and never come back. Because you are originally from New Jersey. So we have some common blood
Yeah,
here.
actually, originally from New York, Brooklyn, then lived in New Jersey, and yeah, so I'm a New York, New Jersey guy. And there's still stuff I miss about it. I go back a few times a year at least to get I joke, my New York fix. Um,
That's
but yeah, I mean, listen, I'm looking out at the marina. I'm 5 blocks from the beach, and I'm 15 minutes from LAX, so can't complain.
Yeah, rub it in, Corey. Rub it in. Sure. So we cross paths. We know so many people in common. And the one thing I'll tell you, the common thread that I hear when your name comes up is expert.
Mm.
And it's probably because, you've been an attorney 40 years, 27 of those in our industry. And as we spoke, you've done not a few, not dozens, but hundreds of advisor extractions from probably every firm in the country, I would assume, right?
I mean, pretty much. I mean, every once in a while we get some regional bank or something or whatever we haven't dealt with in Utah, some space, but much more commonly we're dealing with places we've taken people out from already.
So you talk about a wealth of knowledge for the people that were able to join us today. That's great. We have a great audience, and we'll be sure to send this out. But you talk about a depth of knowledge is something you read and you can learn, but then there's wisdom. And Corey's got 27 years of wisdom of advisor extractions and what doesn't work. We're going to talk about some of that today. We're going to talk about if you're an advisor in those constrained environments, what do you do in a year out, 6 months out, 3 months out? I think this is going to be a really good conversation where someone's going to get really good practical knowledge and things that they can do the moment this webinar ends to be able to start that path to independence that I took back in 2020 after being 17 years an advisor within an insurance company, going independent, and now 5.5 years later, reflecting on the dozens of advisors that we've extracted. But now you have hundreds of advisors from Corey's perspective. So great. Thanks again for carving some time out. Love the fact you're able to do this. And when you and I speak, it's the passion's in your voice of helping advisors make these intentional decisions, not to step on landmines, not to burn bridges. So we talk to advisors on a weekly basis from every firm around the country,
Yep.
and wirehouses, banks, insurance companies, they have so many questions. So when an advisor engages you in your firm and they're like, hey, I'm here, I can't be here anymore. What are some of the main questions that they're asking you and your team for help?
Yeah, I mean, so listen, the first thing, and this comes up sometimes even before we're engaged, whether it's some of our clients who we do onboarding for, right? Where we represent the firm that's coming in, or it's sometimes with the BDOs at the custodians, right, who are pitching these guys, for years sometimes to try to convince them to come to the independent space, whether that's joining an existing firm on their platform or going fully independent. The first thing is always, hey, how do I get out without getting sued, right?
Mm.
And am I going to be able, and the corollary to that is, am I going to be able to take my clients with me, and move my entire book or the far majority of my book, and those two are related. Now, having done this for so long and being at today where there are thousands and thousands of firms that have done this and where people are seeing more evidence, right? I'm not saying the concern's not there, but at least people have seen it's become such a well-worn path. When we were
Mm.
doing it in the early days, right, it was the Wild West. In fact, you say 27 years ago, The first advisor we took out was 27 years ago. It wasn't even like, to call it a transition, a breakaway, or whatever. Like, I didn't know what any of those things were. It was some guy who was leaving U.S. Trust, right? And he was setting up his own, wealth management firm. I barely knew what that was, back then. And the interesting thing is, we did a monetization deal a couple of years ago for that same guy 25 years later.
Oh, wow.
But yeah. So it's, great full circle moment. I mean, and it's sort of, he tracked like the growth and maturation of the industry. But yeah, but that's still a concern. Even though people have seen it, they've seen other people do it. They also hear, because listen, the press doesn't report on. I mean, they report on moves, but like the focus is not on the 98% of folks that transition and they don't get sued, right? The thing that really hits the press, so and when I give these stats, these are our stats. I don't know what, when people work with other people, I don't have industry stats, but less than 2% of our advisors, have any litigation. I can give you the categories and reasons why they do. But despite that, that's, it's always a concern. And we always said to them, listen, we're going to give you a roadmap, literally a written roadmap on how you can do this right, how you can't do this right. We're going to have a conversation of what might be, on a risk tolerance spectrum. You can make a business decision. But largely, if you follow our advice and you're not a multi-billion-dollar team who has a risk of getting sued, and you don't think you can beat forensic computing because you're a cowboy and you don't listen to us, or you don't have somebody who has a grudge against you at some small firm, odds are you're going to be fine if you follow our advice.
Last time we spoke, a few weeks ago, week and a half ago, you brought that 98% and 2%, and I got upset.
Right.
Because I remember I told you, wait a minute, Corey, I always tell people I'm the 1%er.
Right.
Because unfortunately, the insurance company that I broke away from, they felt the need to file a FINRA action against me, and their words exactly, to make an example of me so more people don't leave.
Right.
Was more personal. We got into the why, and you say, look, this was personal. It's not the norm. So I can't say I'm a 1%er anymore. I have to say I'm a 2%er. It doesn't sound as cool. But 2% I'll take, right? So of those 2%, and I want to get into this because I think when I'm talking to advisors, this fear of litigation is real for a lot of people. Whether or not it's probable, it's still a real fear. Of the 2%, how much of that was because of the behaviors from the breakaway advisor as opposed to firms' default going right to litigation?
Yeah, no, I'd say, listen, there are two big categories, and one is when you say that the actions or approach of the advisors. I mean, I see this all the time. I mean, let me give you an example. When Morgan Stanley went off the broker protocol 6-7 years ago, whatever it was, right? There were 5 litigations that were brought within the first few months, and everybody said, "Oh my God, it's a different landscape now, right? Morgan Stanley's off the protocol for broker recruiting. They're getting super aggressive. They're going to sue everybody." And I studied those 5. Actually, I could only get details on 4 out of the 5 that happened. And in all 4 that I was able to get, this is, back then, every one of those teams did something wrong. Like that would have run them into trouble, even if Morgan Stanley was still on the protocol. They downloaded a client list. There was forensic evidence of them, of taking data they shouldn't take, or there was clear evidence that they, spoke to a bunch of clients in advance, which is a breach of the duty of loyalty. So the point is that people, first of all, some people go out without good advice and just make mistakes. They don't realize that they shouldn't have done something, right? We've had that with some Ameriprise advisors, for example, recently, because Ameriprise used to not enforce, frankly, what their agreement said, and were pretty easy at the branch level on people taking full client files. The agreements never lined up to that, right? We would always tell advisors for years, under the agreements, you're not allowed to do this. They may practically let you do it, but and then in the last year, they've cracked down. So some advisors are just blindsided because they've been represented something, but legally it doesn't line up and the firm changes their policy. But some of them, and these are, listen, I hate to say it, I don't have a lot of sympathy for the ones that no matter how many times we tell them you can't beat forensic computing, right? They're going to find everything you download, put to a zip drive, email it to yourself, even print. And then they think they can, right? And then, the other side sends me forensic evidence of something my client denied doing. And again, this is such a tiny percentage. But, if you're in that 1% where you did something wrong, I don't have a lot of, I'm going to represent you and try to cut a deal and, get you to move on anyway, but I have a lot less sympathy. And then the other reason, we spoke of this a little bit before on air. The other reason the percentage might be, and by the way, I say under 2%, so maybe it's 1.8. It's not a full 2. Is that you have bigger and bigger teams, right? You have bigger and bigger
Right.
teams, and the truth is, if you're a $10 billion team or even a few billion-dollar team, there's much more chance. I mean, not to mention the open arc, recent
Right.
$123 billion transition. I mean, if you're a bigger team, you just have more risk of getting sued just again to create friction, to have other advisors think it's not going to be so easy to get out, right?
Yeah.
And that's just a risk when you're a big team, no matter how clean you are, no matter how great you do stuff. I always have to tell clients at that larger level that they have a risk. Now, ultimately, they usually end up okay. They spend some legal fees, right? The other side tries to make a point. Look at the open arc situation. Merrill Lynch couldn't get the TRO or injunction, right? So they'll go to FINRA. It'll either fight its way out or they'll come to a confidential settlement. But the point is, those are the two biggest categories, right? You were in that third category where somebody just had a grudge, and that's the smallest percentage of the three categories that make up that less than 2%.
I am still a 1%er. Corey Kupfer said it. It's written in stone now. I'm going to get my 1%er motorcycle jacket wear it around the office now. Thank you, Corey.
I love it.
All these breakaways. This would be interesting. We haven't spoken. I know the biggest reason why advisors come to Cornerstone and they're fed up with their firms, whether it's a regional BDRIA, insurance company, wirehouse, whatever.
Yep.
What do you see as a common thread that gets the advisors to that tipping point? Because it's never usually one event. I call it drips over time, where it's just, oh, that stinks, but I'm comfortable. Oh, this is no good. And all of a sudden, I can't be here anymore. Where's the exit door? Is there a common thread, like the most common occurrence that gets the advisor to that point of, I can't stay here anymore?
Yeah, I'll say a few things, and I want to talk about sort of what I call the push and then the pull, right? Because it used to be much more the push, but now there's a lot more pull as well. So on the push side, it's compensation changes, right? Constant. I mean, you read it all the time. Every other, time, whether wirehouses or the private, whatever, they're changing comp structures, right? And it's never, it's almost never better for the advisors.
You're kidding. I thought it was always better for the advisors and the clients.
Right.
Corey, I thought, okay, all right.
And the other thing you hear is about, there's a general, not just in the RIA industry, you hear in any HR that people quit managers, not necessarily firms. So, bad management. And then there's what they call, just the feeling tied with compliance, because here's a key point that people don't really think about. If you look at, let's take a wirehouse model, because that's where most, but it applies across even in IBDs, even at private banks, insurance companies, whatever, right? Maybe 10% of what they call compliance is actual compliance, meaning compliance means what the law says you can and can't do. The other 80 or 90% is risk management. They call it compliance, but it's really risk management, right? And by the way, I don't blame them. If I was running Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley or UBS, and I've got thousands of advisors, right? I can't have, and by the way, frankly, some of them are real quality and whatever, and some of them I'm not so sure about, right? Or they're younger or they're less experienced or whatever. I can't have all these people going out and making their own decisions on, what they're allowed to do and not to do, what products, what managers, what, have them putting people in all these alts or whatever it is, right? I can't do that because I've got to run a model that is down to the lowest common denominator. And by the way, that is an appropriate and smart model for a wirehouse to run. Like, people gripe about it, but that's the model they should be running from their point of view.
I absolutely agree.
But if you are an advisor who is great at what you do and has developed a phenomenal book of business and is smart and wants to be able to serve your clients in the best way possible, and those constraints over time really become limiting, and people want to get out of that captive model, not to mention, so it's not just limiting in what they can do, but not to mention, what also they're pushed to do in terms of, whether it's proprietary products or certain preferences or whatever it is, right? That they do. So all of those things are the biggest items that, that push, right? Comp changes, bad management, and all the, the compliance constraints. But now, especially, as this industry has matured, I mean, the pull has become so much, greater. Like it used to be, okay, I had that push, but you know what? I'm a little worried, maybe like research capabilities or tech platforms or support and consulting in the transition or, back end for the clients, whatever. I don't know if I can get that out there in the independent space. And,
Hmm.
in the very early days, it was legitimate. The custodian offerings weren't as robust. You didn't have consultants. You didn't have firms like yours and others that have, established platforms. I mean, it was a bit of the Wild West, right? Nowadays, there's none of those things I listed that aren't at least comparable, if not usually better, in the independent space, right?
Hmm.
Well, that's research, access to product, tech stack, whatever, because the space is because, consultants, you name it, the ecosystem, the infrastructure, the tech, everything has become way more sophisticated. So you don't have any of those objections anymore, and you have the pull of the more freedom and independence. And then when you start to add on the fact that the valuations and multiples for independent books of business and independent firms, and the PE money and and all the models that have come into the space and the flexibility
Hmm.
and the choices, the pull has become really strong as well.
Oh yeah, that's excuse me, a very compelling part of the story is this explosion in interest in the independent model. You don't see private equity firms going to wirehouse advisors and saying, "Hey, we
Right.
want to invest in your book," or the Ameriprise advisors, things like that. They're looking for firms like mine. They're looking for independents because they know this model is it's not where the industry's going, it's where the industry is. This is the independent channel's the largest growth today, exits from banks, wirehouse insurance companies in double digits every year, and the
Yes.
entries in the independent space. Um, with me, what I found the common thread to be, and we talked about this in depth, is conflicts of interest.
Oh yeah.
So,
Definitely.
as a CFP, as an advisor, being at an insurance company with a product requirement, you have to sell a certain amount of our product between July 1st and June 30th
Yep.
in order to keep your payout, the benefits for your family. And it's just, again, these drips over time got really big to the point of a broken pipe. I'll tell you a story. What prompted me to leave was they 4X'd our core product requirement overnight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, well, now you're taking someone who charges fees for financial planning. We do advisory asset management. So we're fiduciaries. But instead of having to do this minimum per year, you have to now do 4 times that. Now I'm forced to work with clients that I choose not to work with, that I just need to sell a product to check the box. I'm out. I said, you made me an insurance agent overnight. It's not why I got in this industry. You moved the goalpost to
Yep.
another stadium by 4Xing it. So I'm on the phone with the manager. So it was in an agency system. So they have a New Jersey office. I'm on the phone with the managing partner. And I am voicing my concern over the rule change. Let's just say that. Let's leave
Yes.
it there. His response to me was, well, do what the other people are doing to fix it. I go, what? Well, what are they doing? They're taking their clients' money, add bonds in their portfolios, and they're buying whole life insurance with it. And do
Wow.
you ever see a moment? I'm going to grab my phone real quick.
Hmm.
Do you ever do one of these when you look at the phone because you can't believe what you just heard?
Yep.
I did one of those. And I said, hey, would you do that with your money? Well, no, I wouldn't do that with mine. Okay.
Yep.
Roger that. Right.
Yeah.
And you talk about the pipe bursting, that the only answer to trying to convert a fiduciary CFP to an insurance agent was take money out of this platform where you're acting in the client's best interest and fund something that's not in their best. It was just so bizarre. I couldn't wrap my hands around it. So I said, all right, I'm at that point, we charted our course out, but we have some great questions and by the way, I didn't mention this in the beginning. If you have questions for Corey or myself, please put it in the chat. This is great because you would know this. We've done a few dozen here. You've done hundreds. What does a
Yes.
smooth transition timeline look like? How far out should an advisor start planning? Great question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Listen, I mean, I hate to do the, sooner the better answer, but the truth is the sooner the better. I mean, so let's work backwards, right? Depends on where you're going. So first of all, if you're joining an existing independent platform, right, you need less time. If you're opening your own RA firm, you need to assume SEC approval, assuming you're over 100 million,
Mhm.
in AUM in most states, right? Because the SEC has up to 45 days to approve, and you got to prepare your ADV and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, if you're joining an existing independent platform, you don't have that piece of it. Now, in terms of planning, there's a lot, that you want to. And again, if you're going fully independent, you got tech stack to figure out, and you got custodian relationships. There's a lot more, right? If you're joining another place, though, people think, oh wait, they have everything set up for me, which is great, right? I can join quickly. Well, here's the thing about it. The further in advance, if we get somebody 6 months in advance, right, year in advance, as opposed to 2 months or 3 months, there may be a lot of things we can do to say, hey, listen, let's talk about the platform you're on. Let's let you understand in advance what you can and can't do, so that you don't make inadvertent mistakes. So you don't do stuff that you didn't realize you couldn't do during that period of time. And by the way, when we talk about risk spectrum, honestly, if you have more time, there's less risk in certain things. So for example, if you're on a model, let's say where you can't solicit clients, so we're pursuing a non-solicitation strategy.
Right.
It's a good thing if you are connected to your clients on social media, LinkedIn, right? Most likely, or whatever other platforms you're on. Well, if you are leaving in 2 weeks and you have 50% of your clients that you aren't connected to, and you go on a spree and suddenly start, connecting to a bunch of, of clients at the last minute, right? The firm is, and I'm not saying that it's a winning claim, but the firm has much more of a claim of, hey, he or she only did that because they knew they were leaving, which is a potential breach of fiduciary duty. If you do that kind of thing over a year period or a 6-month period, because you want to put a program in place to make sure you're connected with clients, assuming you're on a model where they allow you to do that. There are some models where they don't want you, but most they do, right? That's just one little example of, hey, we're having more time to prep on something that would put you in a better position to transition. Your clients would make more sense. We have situations where people need to move quickly. Maybe something happened at the firm, they're upset about it. They have a client issue they're going to lose because something stupid the firm did. And obviously we'll move them more quickly. But, if you can start thinking about this 6 months, a year out, that is great.
And then, so getting closer, you make the decision, say you decide to bolt on, say building it is not for you. You want to bolt on, you want to save all that time and energy to dealing with clients, growing your business instead of, I say this all the time, because we talk to advisors that are at the size that they could open up their own RIA, they can tuck in. Said the great thing about building your own RIA like we did is you get to, we have 30 pieces of technology that we picked from scratch. They all talk to each other. We have internal integrations. It's great. The bad thing is you have to pick 30 technologies that all integrate and all talk to each other. Okay. Because we have an operations person that just handles our tech. So you may be at a size where, hey, I got good revenue, but I need a COO. I need an operations person to run our tech. We need a chief compliance officer. We need a marketing and client experience person, where the argument can be made, economies of scale work. It's a numbers game. Like advisors, we've had a tremendous advisor growth here because this, and what we built, and our backstory, this was built just so advisors can be advisors. We'll take care of everything else. Not all firms are like that. And I think that's really our value proposition. But one of the things that any advisor we're talking to, I always say, go talk to another firm. I want you to get it all. Go talk to a couple. Now, if you got a call from an advisor and, Corey, I'm leaving within a year, I'm going to go interview some firms. What are the top 3 questions you would tell this person to ask each firm to kind of almost like deal, no deal kind of things? And what would be the important questions to ask? Either it's a plus or it's a go, no go situation.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is to ask yourself a couple of questions before you ask the firms questions, right? So the first question is, what are you looking for, right? Are you looking for a model where you still own your book and you can come and go as you please, right? And which means that basically, even though you may be going on their ADV and things like that, if you own your book, which means several things, you own your clients, you can take them, you solicit when you leave, you can take that client information, all that kind of stuff, right? Then essentially that platform, you're a client of theirs, and they got to keep you happy, right? Whereas if you're going on a model where they say it's independence, but it's really, if you look into their model, it's really more captive, right? Then, I mean, it may not be wirehouse captive or insurance company captive, but there's some level of being captive. You'd be surprised, right? it's a very different model. And listen, for some folks, especially maybe if you're ready to exit and they're going to buy your book or whatever, okay, I'm not saying there aren't advantages and disadvantages, but the first thing you have to understand and ask yourself is, what do you want? What are you looking to do? What are you looking to move away from? What are you looking to move towards? Do you want to maintain the ownership of your book, the independence? Is having your own brand important, or you are willing to roll into someone else's brand, right? And then what kind of support do you want, right? How much do you need? What do you want to be doing on your own? And then what are the value adds that they provide? So these are the questions you're asking yourself. They become the questions you're going to ask the other people, right? So you're going to, if it's important to you to own your book and be able to leave, you're going to ask them, okay, am I free to do that? Can I take all my client information when I leave? Is there a notice period, right? I want to be able to know. And then the big thing is listen, the great news is there's so many options out there now.
Yeah.
The challenging news is there's so many options out there now, right? It used to be, when I started in this, there were very few options. Now people are trying to sort through and figure out the differences, right? So one of the things, and listen, a lot of folks are going to say, we're going to take a lot off your hands. You're going to get the focus on clients. We'll do your compliance. We'll do your back office, middle office. We'll do whatever. Okay. That's almost table stakes. But what else are they providing you? What else are they providing you? Ask about the organic growth rates of the advisors on their platform. Are they helping you grow? Okay. Are they helping you grow? What are you expected to do? What are they going to do for you to fully understand that? Does that fit into what you want, right? If you want to be out developing business and just advising clients, are you really going to be freed up to do that? Or are there other things that, that you're going to do? Obviously you want to make sure that they have all of the, the different, whatever your clients need in terms of the managers, different types of accounts, things like that, whatever, do they have that? But what is the value add? There are many, many platforms out there that just, cover your compliance and handle some admin, but they're not providing growth strategy. They're not providing, M&A strategy, if that's on the picture. They're not, marketing for you and or teaching you and coaching you on how to market and develop and grow your business. So, what are you getting that's beyond what I consider these days table stakes for a platform?
I think that's important. I mean, it's knowing your, we call them primaries and secondaries. We have every advisor go through this exercise of give us your primaries, give us your go, no goes. I want to be able to keep my DBA name. I want to be able to charge fees for financial planning. I want to be able to take my clients if I leave. Usually the primaries, there's usually 2 to 4 max.
Yep. Yeah.
The secondaries, hey, I would love to use Holistic Plan for tax planning. I want to be able to use this technology for this, and I want to be able to invest in this. I want to have you access to this manager. With me, with us, succession has come up a lot.
Yes.
In fact, in the last 3 weeks, we've had 3 large advisors reach out and say, we can't have our succession plan run. 3 completely that don't know each other. Same narrative. We know now I can't have my succession plan in this firm. How does this look with you? And these models vary. Like I have a good friend of mine. He's actually out by you. He's right outside of LA. He's got 75 W-2 advisors.
Yep.
So he's taking in these independent advisors, converting to W-2. He's got an equity model and everything. It's a fantastic model. And he's got tremendous growth. One of the questions I would ask every advisor is like, hey, what's your plan? Hey, if you're in your 30s and I'm in growth mode, great. Ask who owns that firm.
Yes.
Because if private equity is one of the primary owners, their organic growth may be second to EBITDA because that's their measure of if we're winning or not. I think that would be one of the really important questions to ask because I talk about this. We spoke about this. Like you can have alignment with a firm, but you really have true alignment when your vision, the firm's vision overlap.
Yes.
That's where those organic growth rates, skyrocket. Like what makes us different here is our coaching and consulting model. We have monthly mastermind meetings. 2 are live. We're doing 1 in South Carolina and then a month at our advisor summit. I meet with each advisor quarterly. We do an annual plan. I help segment their book of business. We run book of business revenue reports. These are the things that are organic growth to me is much better or more important to me than growth by acquisition or tuck-in. And that's why we don't take a lot of advisors on. We say no to more than we say yes to because culturally they have to fit and they have to have that growth mindset. And not a scarcity mindset. Where I was on a call on Monday with one advisor team in Manhattan and one advisor team in Florida. They're coming together to develop a new investment strategy for clients they have in common. That's the synergy that we have here. And that's why when people really take a look at our ecosystem and our culture, it's much different. EBITDA is not even a word that's ever even used here. In fact.
Yeah, and listen, the organic growth point is so important, Carmine. And you and I have talked about this past, but I mean, listen, if you really, I mean, the market has hidden, a lot, right? Everybody has good growth rates. Or if you don't, if you haven't over the last 15 years or whatever, you're really in trouble and doing something wrong. But when you take out market, right? Because that's, I mean, when you
Great
take
point.
out market, right? The studies show that most advisors, that the average advisor is growing only 3 or 4% true organic growth without market. Okay. Now, so people are shocked by that because, they'll quote, 8, 10, 12, 15% growth rates, but it's a lot of times it's with market, right? So that's the key point. So if you can, a place that can really help you grow organically, especially if you're doing a retirement deal and you're sunsetting in 6 months or whatever, a year, maybe it's less. But I'll tell you what, I mean, I was just at a conference speaking, and the biggest part of the conversation at the conference was G2, was Generation 2, right?
Yeah.
And even if you are looking to retire, first of all, if you have a G2, they're still looking to grow, and your ability to bring them along with you, if you're making a transition to a platform and not have them either leave or be unhappy, they're going to be much more concerned with the organic growth rates that they can achieve because they have more runway than you, right? So
That's
even
right.
if that's not important to you, it's important to your team. So that's a huge point. And, there's very different, you want to ask that question, like, how do you help advisors grow and what are the organic growth rates that these organic without market growth rates that the advisors have?
We do it we take the 60% stock, 40% bond portfolio return out of the growth rate.
Yep.
If we look at the breakdown of what model, so we run all of our portfolio management in-house. So if we look at percentage of who's in what model, 65-35 tends to be the average for every book. So we look at what that did and we take that off the growth rate. And you're right. Some advisors are single digits after that. We spoke about, we have some teams that have absolutely exploded. And that's really you need to strip that growth out because that's, I don't want to say it's artificial, but it kind of is. Like by the way, every advisor is investing the same way for the most part. They're having the same growth rate you are then.
That's right. And listen, when you think about it, when it does come time to monetize, right? I mean, you're getting so that the organic growth rate is important on eventual enterprise value and monetization value as well, because you're going to get a multiple on that additional revenue. So it's super important. And a lot of the platforms out there, I mean, listen, I know, Carmine, you guys do a lot for you. I mean, the masterminds and things like that or whatever. I mean, not every platform, most platforms don't do all that stuff, right? So, when people look at it, and listen, there are other models out there. You mentioned your friend in California that, has an equity model and things like that. And some people are attracted to the PE-backed models, right? I mean, their argument is that, they're going to increase, they're focused on EBITDA, they're going to increase, you're going to get some rollover equity, maybe get a little piece, and you're going to get another bite of the apple. I've been doing, roll-ups since the 80s in various industries, right? So I've seen that. Sometimes they work out great, sometimes not so much. It depends on how they hit the market. It depends on whether, that promised 25x return on their equity is actually going to come true. Who's going to be the winners and losers, you don't know. But listen, if that's the game you want to play, I always say to my clients that are, that are bringing in advisors, whether it's recruiting or acquiring, right, that don't have a PE model, and they'll say to me sometimes, how do I compete with the PE model? I'm saying you don't, right? You don't compete with them at their game, but not everybody wants their game, right? No, not everybody wants to buy into that. They want a different environment. And if you can show that, you guys have done a great job of this, Carmine. If you can show your value proposition, what you provide to advisors is not the PE model, but it's something else that brings other kinds of value that people want. There's a portion of advisors, a bunch of advisors that don't want that PE model.
We run into that as well. We had a large team join us recently, and they were vetting another firm, BDRA, one of the big regional ones, and the one advisor asked me, says, "Hey, look, what do you think?" I said, "Well, I know someone that was there that left and went to a good friend of mine's RA out in Sonoma, California." I said, "Let me connect you to. You talk to him from the horse's mouth, right? I don't want to wordsmith anything." And it turned out that this firm was promising the world they're stroking a check, right? And we don't do that.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, once you're in the machine, he says you're lost. You're gone. That's why I left. I left as soon as I could because he looked at our model because we run very similar practices. And he said, I've grown so much faster here because of bureaucracy and there was really no support because all they cared about was profit. So they were not investing back in the advisor experience, certainly not invested back in the client experience because every EBITDA dollar matters.
Yep.
Right. So I would say that's a filter for me if I were looking for a firm. And again, but true alignment may exist. You may be on the back end of an exit in 5 years and this RA says, "Hey, we're gonna roll up as many and transact in 5 to 7 years." Great, you got a match. If that's your goal, fantastic. Most
Listen,
advisors in growth mode, they're not doing that.
no, they're not. And it's I always say know thyself. It's like the
Right.
best thing we can do. The beauty of this industry is that there's so many options out there now, all across the
Yeah.
spectrum, all kinds of different models. And if you are really self-aware, when I spoke to an advisor yesterday, who unfortunately he's actually not unhappy with the firm he's at, to be honest with you, but he's very unhappy as the deal he cut has played out, right? Because he didn't. I mean, and obviously I can't get into detail on the firm, but the point is, he didn't really think through the implications of every aspect of this deal. And by the time he paid back the money he owed the prior firm and whatever, and what the comp structure was and all this kind of stuff, right? He's not where he wants to be. And the last thing I ever want anybody to do, and listen, and the onboarding firms, right? Carmine, you run a firm, everybody else who's a CEO or all the recruited people, the business development people, the deal people, they don't want it. You don't want an advisor to come in and not be happy with where they
No.
end out, especially if it's nothing to do with you. It has to do with them not aligning what their goals and wishes and the life they want to have with the platform or the model that they join. So spend that time to really understand what you want to get out of it, and then make sure that that platform you're joining aligns with what your vision, goals, stage of life, and all that kind of stuff is. That's the biggest mistake I see people make. I mean, we can negotiate the legal deals and look at the legal documents and tell them whatever, but if you go on to a model that's misaligned with your goals and vision, it's gonna be a problem.
You've heard it here, folks. Know thyself. Written by Corey Kupfer. We have another great question. We're going to get to this and we're going to probably close out on this. Where do you see the independence, the advisor independence go in the next 5 years? So where do you see the independent side of this industry go in the next 5?
Yeah, I mean, so listen, we've been talking about this a lot. So here's the amazing thing, right? I mean, this industry has matured a lot from, when it really wasn't even barely an industry 27 years ago when I took my first guy out of US
Yeah.
Trust, right? But I mean, we're still, in the third, maybe fourth inning at best, okay? Because, you hear about the quote unquote consolidation, you hear about the PE money, you hear about all the buyers coming in. Well, do you know the stat I got at this conference I was at, and I haven't vetted it personally, but it's a credible source, I'm sure it's about right, is that 2022, there were 12 to 13,000 independent RA firms, right? Today, they're approaching 16,000. So in the last 4 years, which is the consolidation PE aggregator integrator, era, so to speak, right? There's actually been an increase by thousands, right? There are hundreds of deals per year, and and there's on
Wow.
average, it sounds like almost 1,000, 900, 1,000 new firms coming in. So what does that tell you? That tells you that we've got a long way to go. So,
Oh
even
yeah.
though there's been quote unquote consolidation, there hasn't been consolidation when you look at it as an overall industry. So the movement is still heavily towards independence. Certainly with the bigger and bigger team, I think this open arc transition is a watershed moment because it's a whole
Oh
different
yeah.
level of what's come out. I was at this conference speaking to actually some of the other custodians who did. So that was a Schwab, right, deal with Dynasty.
Hmm.
Right. The folks at the other custodians, even though they didn't get that deal, were thrilled that it happened because, of course, now they can, maybe other teams like that will want
That's
to
right.
leave. So we have so much more runway, right, in this space. I in the next 2 months have 3 whiteboarding sessions with new aggregator, platforms in the space who want to start, right? One coming in from the UK, one coming in from the tech, fintech space, whatever.
Oh,
Right. So
wow.
there's all these new players who still want to come in and get into the M&A game, right? So the models are going to keep proliferating. They talk about at some point there'll be a consolidation of the consolidators. That will
Yeah.
happen, but we're not there yet, right? And then obviously, as that happens and they become more wirehouse-like, arguably, right?
Mm.
Then there's going to be even more opportunity for other players to say we're different than them, right? So we are. So I mean, I can go on and on this, but we are still so comparatively early in this cycle and the maturation of this industry that I think it's just going to continue up. The M&A stats are like that. There's been more deals reported. DeVoe and Echelon came out reports recently. Basically, in 3 quarters, we've done as many deals as was done last year already.
Wow.
So that's going to continue. The breakaways are continue. The proliferation of different models are going to continue. Listen, obviously, we can have a market downturn that'll create a speed bump, but it's only going to be a speed bump because all of the underlying factors of this industry. And listen, and there's a reason why PE, there's a reason why additional lenders, there's a reason why other players have discovered this industry. You guys are in a great industry. I
We
mean, come
are.
on, great clients. You can really make a difference in their lives. The business model is phenomenal. I mean,
The
recurring
business
fees
model is great.
pulled automatically out of a custodial account quarterly in advance. I mean, there's so many factors that are positive that we've got. There's a lot of good to come.
Well, I'm optimistic. I think that I wouldn't have chosen even then, if I knew then what I knew now, I still wouldn't have chosen a different path. I think client impact has always been my dopamine. Now it's advisor impact,
Yeah.
extracting these great advisors from these really constrained environments and seeing them 2, 3 years later of being not a better practice, more revenue, but a better person. Because
Yeah.
when you take that distraction of having those requirements, I had one of my advisor's wives hug me. We had a quarterly meeting there in Manhattan. They came in for an in-person, and she's like, he's a different person. He's a better father. He's a better husband.
Yep.
And because you got rid of that 100-pound rucksack that we've all decided to walk around with, that old firm we were at, and you just one day decided to put it down. So, Corey, this has been a powerful conversation. The problem is I could be here for 3 hours. For you, it's not a problem
100%.
because you're 3 hours behind.
No, listen, let me close out by saying this because it confirms what you just said. The consistent thing we hear about these hundreds and hundreds of advisors who leave constrained environments and whether they're opening their own or joining an existing independent platform, right? Pretty much to a person, every single one of them says to me, the only regret I have about this is I didn't do it earlier.
God, amen to that. That's the common thread. And let's close out on this. There's an advisor either logged into the webinar, will listen to this at some point, and they're on the ledge. They're in that insurance company. They're in the wirehouse. And they know that independence is the right play for them long-term, but they're comfortable. They're afraid for some breakaway friction, whatever you want to call it. Talk to them. Give them one word of advice right now. If they're on that ledge of decision right now, what would you say to them?
A few things. Number one, at this point in the game, you are far, there's so many examples of people who've done this successfully, right? So if they can do it, you can do it.
Great.
Number two, there's a huge number of resources out there, right? And folks like, myself, listen, I have no skin in the game. Speak to me, speak to the consultants, speak to people who are not at a particular firm. Listen, even Carmine, if he wants you to come over, he's going to convince you to come over. I know him to be a guy of integrity and and all that kind of stuff. So I believe his word. But the truth is, he has a vested interest, right? Speak to somebody who doesn't have a vested interest, right? I have all kinds of clients in this space. I have no vested interest in you going to any given place. There are consultants out there that are similar. There's a lot of people out there that can give you the lay of the land, right? Talk to you about the different options and talk to you about and give you comfort that, like most advisors coming out of either wirehouses or insurance companies, private banks or less, you're likely going to bring over 85, 90+% of your clients. And by the way, 5% of those you're going to not bring over by choice, because you're going to
Yeah,
use it
right.
as an opportunity to thin the book, right? And so that's my biggest advice is know that a lot of other people have done it before. And there's all of these people out there that don't have, a nickel in the dime of wherever you go who can give you independent advice. So reach out to them.
Well said. Corey, thanks again for your time. Now, Corey works in multiple capacities. I want to make this very clear. So, as an advisor with breakaway concerns or questions, great. He's your point of contact. He's, again, the expert. If you're a firm that's tucking in advisors or through an M&A side, that's what we're using Corey for. Even for advisors to have their contracts reviewed at the firm level, Corey's also, him and his team are a resource for that as well. So reach out to him, pick his brain. Again, 127 years of wisdom. I don't even know how your head isn't big, and I don't even know how you can hold that much information and walk around. It's great. So much wisdom there. And he's such a giver with his time. He's educated me in the last couple of months. We became friends, and I learned something new every time talking to him. So please do yourself a favor, reach out. And if you have any question on the independent channel, what Cornerstone can offer you as an independent advisor, how our firm operates, or general questions, book a time with me. No obligation, completely confidential. I'll give you I'll call the balls and the strikes, give you enough information to make an informed decision. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to speak to you soon. Have a good day.